In The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Sauron will undoubtedly create his one ring to govern them all, and the next season 2 is when it must happen. Only a handful of the titular Rings of Power were made in the first season of the Prime Video series, which was utilized to establish the Second Age setting and tale. But when Season 2 of the TV series delves more into Sauron's wicked actions and his conflict with Middle-earth, the Dark Lord's most powerful weapon will eventually need to be used. The main plot point of The Lord of the Rings was Sauron's One Ring, which Frodo Baggins had to deliver to Mordor in order to slay the Dark Lord. This implies that there is a great deal of curiosity in the One Ring and how it was made in the Rings of Power. It's exciting to witness Sauron build the ring that caused so much difficulty, especially because this is the first time he's seen as a corporeal entity in a movie rendition. We will probably see this momentous occurrence in Rings of Power Season 2. The initial set of episodes in the Rings of Power was intended to establish the setting and plot. Therefore, it makes sense that there was no One Ring visible. The teaser for Prime Video's next episodes suggests that in the upcoming season, the titular Rings of Power will need to be made. A few rings are seen being thrown into a fire by Celebrimbor, who seems to be attempting to destroy them. Later, King Durin Roman III picks up a jeweled ring, which is probably one of the 7 Rings of Power that the dwarves were given. That means that in the next Rings of Power book, Sauron will have to craft his 16 presents. The Dark Lord must also develop his weapon in the Rings of Power Season 2, as the goal of the 16 Rings of Power, 7 for the dwarves and 9 for men, is to enable Sauron to dominate the leaders of these races with his own One Ring. If so, what would be the point of bestowing such potent gifts onto his adversary? The reveal of the Dark Lord's One Ring, of course, would undoubtedly rank among the show's most dramatic moments, so it may wait until the very end. In the canon of Tolkien, Sauron, while in his elvish form known as Anadr, deceives Celebrimbor and the elves of a region into assisting him in creating the 16 Rings of Power. He then returns to Mordor, where he secretly forges a second ring using the flames of Mount Doom, one that would govern the others as well as their carriers. If this is the storyline that the Rings of Power follows, then the fact that Anadr appears in a region during the second season teaser suggests that he won't go back to Mordor until near the conclusion of the film. Considering the rise and collapse of the plot in the Rings of Power Season 1, this makes sense. The 3 elven rings were created in the last episode of the first set of programs on Prime Video, and they weren't directly related to Sauron. This would follow the first season's concept if the same were true for the One Ring. The dramatic conclusion to the Rings of Power Season 2 will undoubtedly surpass the moment when Sauron creates his One Ring, making it an ideal way to wrap up the story. It's a terrific hook to pique viewers' interest in seeing more. The Rings of Power Season 2 teaser provides further proof that Sauron will craft his One Ring in this episode, most likely towards the conclusion. At the end of this first look teaser, Sauron unleashed a power burst from his hands, revealing the foundation of a menacing tower. This is presumably Barad-dûr, the Dark Lord's stronghold shown in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings films, topped with a fiery eye. Canon states that Sauron constructs Barad-dûr with the power of the One Ring, suggesting that at the time of this teaser scene, he had already obtained it. But Sauron's hands are visible throughout these sequences in the Rings of Power teaser, and the One Ring isn't on his fingers. It's quite probable that Prime Video will modify canon once again, and the Dark Lord may have created Barad-dûr in a different way. However, it's also likely that the ring's enchantment rendered it invisible. In The Lord of the Rings, only other ring holders, such as Frodo, were able to see Galadriel's Ring of Power. The start of Season 2 of the Rings of Power is much more intriguing because of the great disclosure about Sauron's identity in the first season, and this will undoubtedly continue if the Dark Lord builds his One Ring at the conclusion of the next episode. The men, elves, and dwarves of Middle-earth will have a significantly more formidable foe in fully equipped Sauron, which should provide for more thrilling confrontations in the next seasons. The implications of this, however, may be considerably more profound for any individual who holds one of the 16 Rings of Power by the conclusion of Season 2. The carriers of the 9 and 7 will be susceptible to Sauron's influence and control thanks to the One Ring. The Rings of Power Season 3 should see these individuals' gradual decline into evil. The 9 men will transform into the Lord of the Rings ringwraiths, while the dwarves will become more avaricious. Furthermore, Sauron himself will be somewhat influenced by the One Ring. Sauron is killed by the ring's destruction because its magic entwined with his essence. All things considered, the Rings of Power Season 3 is something to watch out for, since this potent weapon will start a dark transformation for various characters when it is constructed.